are listening to the Moody Girl podcast with me, Emily Fazer. Throughout this series, we're going to be opening the minds of experts and delving into the world of alternative healing methods. Cool. So, hi, Sena. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. How are you?
Absolutely. I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. So obviously this podcast is going to be focusing on microdosing today. I came across your Instagram because I'm kind of interested in it myself anyway, and kind of did a bit of hashtagging, microdosing, and then I came across your account and I thought it was really cool how open you are about microdosing, and also, you share quite a lot about your own journey. So I thought maybe we could start the podcast with you explaining a little bit about, how you got into microdosing, and why it works so well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been microdosing for probably 5 years on and off. Yeah, wow, it's been a while. So I found microdosing after some really big life transitions that I made. So I used to work at Google in Silicon Valley and was commuting, 2 to 3 hours a day and in an office all day. And, I'm so grateful for that experience. I loved my coworkers. I mean, it was incredible on, in so many ways. And I was burned out and I wasn't really connected with myself. So I didn't really know what I wanted. I kind of had just ended up there in a way because I was following the standard track, right? Of like, okay, you go to college and then you get a job. And obviously I worked hard to get there, but it's still, I had never really paused to ask myself, what do I want? What am I passionate about? What am I excited about in the world? So I actually found plant medicine. I was working at Google and I started to connect with spirituality. I started to learn about meditation, and then I took a yoga teacher training, and that really changed everything for me. I didn't have much of a spiritual connection before that. I mean, we're all spiritually connected innately, but I didn't know that. I didn't have access to that part of myself. And so through the yoga teacher training, that really, really opened up a whole new world, a whole new side of me. And I discovered cacao ceremony around the same time. So I was invited to a cacao ceremony in Mexico.
And what for the listeners, because I mean, for me, I'm not sure what a cacao ceremony is. So could you explain that for us, please?
Yes, absolutely. So chocolate, everyone knows what chocolate is.
Yeah.
The same chocolate, so chocolate comes from a tree and it grows in these pods. They almost look like little footballs.
Okay.
And inside the pods are cacao beans, and the cacao beans are what is made into chocolate. That's also broken down and made into cacao nibs or cacao powder. And so ceremonial cacao is basically the cacao bean processed into a cacao paste that you can then make into a drinking, like a beverage. Wow. So you mix it with hot water, and it's an indigenous practice. The Mayan people today in Guatemala, still have a very alive cacao culture. And so the way that cacao originates from South America, and it was originally worked with in beverage form. It wasn't made into chocolate as we know it until the Spanish got involved, and there's a whole history there. But so yeah, it's basically kind of connecting with cacao as a plant medicine, as a like a spirit, if you want to connect with it in that way, if that resonates with you, for more healing or more intentional practice. And when you are working with the pure ceremonial cacao, so chocolate is, quite processed. Most of the chocolate that we're getting, it's quite processed, and it has a lot of additives and preservatives in it. So the actual cacao content in your standard chocolate bar is very small, and it's been really processed. So you're not really getting the medicinal compounds that you can get from cacao paste, like ceremonial cacao paste, which is basically cacao beans, processed in the most minimal way.
Wow.
And you can add a few things here and there, but it's much more pure. And that medicine, when you drink an ounce or so, it can actually increase blood flow in your body. So it can
Wow.
have a very like powerful physical effect.
Wow, that's amazing. And so from obviously, so you were working at Google, you were burnt out, and then you started kind of your yoga practice and then trying cacao ceremonies. And then how did that kind of lead you on to microdosing?
Yeah. So from the cacao, that was my first opening to plant medicine. I ended up quitting my job, going to Peru,
Wow.
worked with master plants. So there's an Amazonian medicine called ayahuasca
Yeah.
that you may be familiar with. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I really just kind of like took like bought a one-way ticket and left everything behind kind of thing. And it was like a deep soul searching mission.
How long did you do that for?
Yeah, I was traveling for about a year.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I was in Peru and then Costa Rica, and then I came back, and that was when microdosing really came into my life. I had worked with psilocybin before, but it wasn't like I was working with other medicines, and I was just having this whole awakening process. So I was kind of moved away from them, and then I came back to California, and I was having a really hard time integrating. I was like, okay, now I have to like figure out how I'm going to make money. I was just living in the jungle, like barefoot for a year, like I don't really want to do this matrix life. I don't want to buy a car. I don't want to have a cell phone. Like, so I was just having a hard time integrating. And I heard a podcast with Paul Stamets, who's a mycologist, a pretty famous one now, and Joe Rogan. And Paul was talking about microdosing, and something just clicked for me. I felt like, wow, this is going to be really supportive for me right now, because I don't need to do more deep, like powerful ceremony work. I need to integrate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when it really came into my life.
And in terms of microdosing, like, the more I've kind of read about it, I've kind of looked at different companies, mainly in Europe. In the UK right now, it's illegal, but in Europe, it's not. So you can do anything from, they kind of suggest maybe doing like a month of microdosing and then a month off and then a month on again. Like, is that the kind of thing that you tried, or how did you take it? What was the kind of initial stages of that?
Yeah, so I did it more consistently, I would say. I think when I started, I did 5 days on, 2 days off.
Okay.
Or gosh, I think it was probably like 3 months straight. And then I took a 2-month break.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, how was that 2 month break as well? So, like, after having that, it probably would have felt, I imagine, you can probably describe it better than I can, but, from having 3 months of doing it quite solidly and then to have that break, did you have some kind of crash, or, how did that feel?
Yeah, it didn't really feel like a crash. I was pretty clear intuitively. I knew I was supposed to take a break from everything I had learned, but I also intuitively felt ready for a break. And so it really felt more like an integration process where, because microdosing it's an expansive thing. It's building new neural connections in your brain. So I think naturally, just like in nature, we need, nature rests and kind of goes into hibernation mode for the winter. It's like we need that time to pause, integrate. We can't constantly be growing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. And the other thing too is that over time, like when you're building these new neural connections, like they don't go away when you stop taking it. So that's different from, like a pharmaceutical medication, where if you stop taking your antidepressant, you might like crash back down. So over time, it does accumulate.
And in terms of, like, I guess from someone who probably didn't know, they may think that you're experiencing, visuals every day of the week. Is that correct? Or, could you describe kind of what you felt like? What did it feel like to kind of initially microdose for those first 3 months?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're not tripping at all. Like you're you're totally able to go about you should be totally able to go about your daily tasks. So as long as you find what I call your sweet spot dose, where you don't feel obviously too high and you'll feel a little something. I like to call it finding your sparkle, where it's like your senses are just a little heightened, where you might be more in tune with the trees. Like if you go outside, you might notice the trees more, you might notice a flower more, you might feel a bit more uplifted,
Yeah.
but it's subtle.
And, in terms of like moving forward now, so obviously you've been doing it for say 5 years. And you said you were feeling burnt out. And if you kind of look back at that now, how can you how far have you come from that moment when you initially took it to where you are today? And do you think kind of microdosing has been, an important part of your healing journey?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think microdosing, I mean, really for me, the biggest thing that it supported me with is integration. I
Mhm.
took a really big life change, and, it's taken me like probably 5 years to really integrate it, to not, to just feel grounded and stable and
Mhm.
solid. And, now I actually don't microdose. I haven't been microdosing super often because it's more of an intuitive practice for me now. So it feels like, at least for that part of my life, it was really supportive. And now I'm kind of integrating, and I've built the new habits, I've built the new neural connections. And, I imagine at some point in the future, I'll probably work with it more consistently again, because you can kind of tailor it to your intention. But right now it's like, I feel like it's worked, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't need to keep taking it every day.
I think that's so, I feel like I resonate with that so much, mainly because like I feel there's a certain level of pressure. My family are very much traditionally, they have traditional jobs. And so I was kind of pressured into, not pressured so much, my family are amazing, but kind of to go down that normal route of finding, a 9 to 5 job, sat in an office, and like my soul inside is like, is this right for me? Like, but it's
Mhm.
it's so hard to kind of break out of that. And sometimes I kind of feel like I'm on, a different sort of wavelength from my body when I'm at work. And then when I get home, it's like I find it hard to then connect again with my body. And I think that's kind of, where my interest lies in microdosing, because I feel from what you're describing, it can kind of, hook you back in with, who you are, what your body's feeling. And as you say, you can just intuitively decide when and when not to take mushrooms. So I just think that's so fascinating that you kind of got to that point. Yeah. And in terms of like, I mean, so for cannabis, the THC is, what gets you high. Is the psilocybin that for mushrooms?
Yeah, basically the psilocybin converts to psilocin once we ingest it, and so
Okay.
that's the like compound that's working. It looks very similar to serotonin molecule. If you look at
Wow.
them next to each other, they're very similar, and so it feels like, it looks like it's designed to just plug right into our serotonin receptors, which is pretty cool.
Wow. And I mean, I was
Mhm.
kind of reading lots of articles about like replacing SSRIs, which, in England are antidepressants, with kind of microdosing. And there's been lots of kind of, scientific experiments and things like that. What are your feelings on that? Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think it's very individual.
Yeah.
I do know plenty of people that have titrated off of their SSRIs and started microdosing. There's actually, there's less of a risk of serotonin syndrome, which was like the concern with, because they're microdosing psilocybin, it's working in the same pathways, it's working in the serotonin pathways. So, I think the one of the main risks is that if you're combining your SSRIs with the psilocybin, it's like there's too much serotonin, right? And that
Yeah.
on a large scale, that can lead to serotonin syndrome, which can be fatal. But
Mhm.
I've actually been tuning into the work of the spirit pharmacist, for
Okay.
anyone out there. He is a pharmacist, and also, an advocate for psychedelics for healing. And so he's been doing a lot of work of kind of bridging, like looking at, different SSRIs, different SNRIs, all the different types of antidepressants, and which psychedelics, might be okay to combine, and how you can combine it in a safe way. So, I think it's quite nuanced. And I know people that have, felt profound healing from making that transition to, because the pharmaceutical route, while super helpful and important for many people, it can, there's, I think like 30% of people report feeling like numb. Right. And so with psilocybin, that's not happening. Your senses are actually like, can be a little more heightened than normal. So it can be a big shift if you're numb and then you're like, oh my God, I'm feeling so much. Right. But that's, I think, one of the reasons that people might want to transition to working with psilocybin, because it allows you to feel the full spectrum of life. Right. The one thing I do want to add really quick is that if you've been on SSRIs for a long time and you do transition, like you taper down, you might need more psilocybin to feel the same effect. So that's just something for people to be aware, because there can be, like, you can be kind of muted to the serotonin already because you've been on the SSRI.
Okay, noted. And in terms of like, over in the UK right now, it's illegal. What's the situation? Whereabouts in California are you?
Yeah, I'm in Northern California in a little town in the Sierra foothills called Grass Valley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I actually have I have friends in Nevada City.
Oh yeah, totally. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Cool.
Yep. So it's not legal here.
Yeah.
It's decriminalized in different counties across California, and it's likely going to be legalized. Like, we're probably following suit like Oregon, which is the first state in the US to be legalized. But legalized, there's a lot of caveats. It's not like once it's legal, it's just anyone can do whatever they want. There's a lot of structure. You're probably going to have to be like licensed and registered to be able to provide it. It's probably going to have to go through like a therapy model of care. So it's not like, it's not just going to be like fully legal, accessible, open for everyone.
Fair enough. But at least it's moving in the right direction, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I was thinking, because I've kind of researched a little bit more about microdosing in terms of, so, you've got microdosing psilocybin, LSD, and then also MDMA. Have you ever tried any of those, or is it mainly psilocybin that was the one for you?
I focused really pretty much on psilocybin. Yeah, that's, I haven't done any extended microdosing with any other medicine, but I've heard great things. Yeah.
And have you ever experienced any, because you're quite openly, an advocate for microdosing. Have you ever experienced any kind of negativity towards that from anyone?
Like, not much, honestly. There's comments here and there on social media platforms. There's definitely still people that are like making comments about taking drugs for healing, or like kind of downplaying the psilocybin as a drug. That's just,
it's crazy. It's crazy to me when it's kind of looked at like that, though, because if you think about all of the pharmaceuticals that we're prescribed on a daily basis, especially more so in America, some of the stuff that you can get is just is quite crazy. And like, even in the UK, just even the contraceptive pill, which I was kind of given at 16, sent me absolutely crazy. So it's just like, it's crazy that people can't kind of be open-minded to maybe trying something that's from the earth, that's grown, and that's where my kind of interest has always lied. Like, why wouldn't we try something that's grown naturally and could be completely helpful for mental health and well-being? So
and like the concept of microdosing, it's like, I'm not even saying, like, I fully believe that, larger doses are healing as well, but I'm not even saying that. I'm just like, take a little bit. And people are like, nah.
No, totally. I think it's just, I do feel like the kind of newer, younger generation are kind of moving towards that. And like, even with my parents, I try to explain, oh yeah, I'm kind of, interested in looking into different methods of healing. And they're like, oh wow, okay, that's a bit out there. But, when you actually think about it, it's not really, why would I go to the pharmacy and get get some antidepressants, and when I could actually find it naturally,
Absolutely. And it's what we've been doing for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I mean,
exactly.
yeah.
It's just crazy that then now it's just illegal.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, if you were going to give any advice to kind of someone who, is listening today and they thought, okay, this is a bit too crazy, how can I even start doing this? What would you suggest? Like, what's your recommendations for them?
Yeah, I would cruise around on the internet. I mean, I know it's a big internet out there, but I would read forums. There's actually a really good forum. It's through the the Microdosing Institute, which are based in the Netherlands. And they have incredible resources on their website. And they have a Discord channel, which is just like a social media forum platform. And there are a lot of great conversations. It's a well curated forum. It's one that I think you can trust. It's not like a scary, weird drug forum.
Yeah.
So that's like, I would suggest just reading stories, like kind of what you did, where you like search hashtags. I feature some conversations on YouTube, my YouTube channel, which is micro.glow, with people and like kind of what they experienced when they first started microdosing. So yeah, I think just like hearing the stories can be really helpful because it'll give you that firsthand experience. Because I think it's just deconditioning, right? It's like we're so conditioned to have these beliefs that I'm going to take mushrooms, I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah.
But if you hear these, incredible stories of people that have been severe alcoholics or severely depressed, and then they have one psilocybin journey and they're like, they have a new lease on life, so
I was reading about that. I was reading about how there was lots of studies into how alcoholics it actually helped them get sober. So
yeah.
they didn't feel like picking up that drink. They didn't feel like going to the pub. And I thought that was so interesting that it can kind of completely, I don't know, I kind of feel like the way that if I was going to describe it in an analogy, or like the way you've kind of explained it, is like you can kind of choose to go one way in your car. Say it's like your commute and you go that way every single day. That's like your brain pathway. And then I feel like psilocybin kind of like redirects you another way, which may seem a bit scary, but it's like, actually, we haven't tried it this way. Let's give it a go. And actually, from this perspective, life's not so bad.
Absolutely. Yeah. It
Yeah.
helps us get outside of the box,
Yeah.
and like what I recently thought about this, and like when you're in the box, you don't even know that outside the box exists.
It's so true. So
So
true. Yeah.
like that's the scary part. And you just think you just all you see is what you think reality is, right? You don't know that there's anything outside of that. But then once you bring the mushrooms in your life, you're like, wow, there's a whole nother outside of the box situation.
Yeah, totally. And is there anything else like you would kind of suggest, or that you can do in terms of like a ritual alongside it? I know that you initially said like yoga, your cacao rituals. Is there anything else that you've found quite like important with your own kind of story?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really, as long as you're coming with, a pure intention, like if you're coming from the heart, if you have just an authentic desire to work with mushrooms, to bring them into your life, like one, it's sourcing is hard. We've already talked about the legality challenges. And I'm not recommending anyone ingest illegal substances, right? And there are many people that do put the medicine out there in a good way. And if you like really feel like you need this for healing, what I've found works, and I know it's not always the answer people want to hear, but I usually suggest to like literally like call them into your life, like set the intention, like pray if you pray, or however you work with the world, like just very clearly state that you're like ready for them to find you. And honestly, I've seen it happen where like they'll make a new connection with someone, and then it'll kind of come into your life. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say is talk to the mushrooms. Like literally, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but talk to them as if they're like a friend. Like introduce yourself. You know, the mycelial web is underneath the soil on 90% of the landmass on Earth. So it's literally underneath all of us. And you can ask them for support. You can ask them things. You can share things with them. Like the mushrooms are the longest surviving species on the planet. You know,
So do you think, so in terms of, probably not going to say this scientifically like you just did, but in terms of, did you say 90% of the land mass?
Mm-hmm.
So do you think when microdosing, that kind of connects you with those mushrooms that are under land mass, and so you become like naturally more connected to the earth and more grounded? Is that kind of what you feel?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, like I think probably everyone, if they take a microdose or a larger dose, you know, they will report feeling more connected with nature. Yeah.
And I mean, so I started Moody Girl basically as like a support network for women suffering with premenstrual conditions, basically. And then it's kind of snowballed through my own healing journey. And I'm kind of just looking into more holistic ways of healing. And in terms of microdosing and your like cycle, is there anything that you can kind of talk about that, you know, did you find it helped you? I mean, I know it's quite a personal thing to talk about.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to talk about it, just that's fine.
No, I'm happy to. Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's helpful. I've had, you know, on and off like periods of extreme, like being extremely emotional before my cycle.
Yeah.
Like sometimes like uncontrollable crying, that kind of thing. And you know, I think everyone needs to tune into microdosing and like their own, like you might need to experiment a bit, because like sometimes it's really helpful. It helps me kind of just like chill and like find a little more balance, like homeostasis. Some other times, psilocybin is also an amplifier. It's a non-specific amplifier. So like I was saying before, your senses can be a bit heightened. And if you're already, like sometimes I've been quite emotional, and then the microdose actually doesn't help. It actually kind of like makes me feel it even more, which is like not what I want. Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think like I'm never really like a one size fits all approach, even for myself. It's not like I microdose every, you know, week before I bleed or anything like that. It's like, I will be very intuitive about like what I need. But it also can help with pain management. So I know a lot of women that find it really supportive for their cycles, for like cramping and pain that we have. But yeah, you know, I think it's going to be person specific.
And I also saw on your Instagram, you had a few kind of mushroom blends that you were doing that they haven't got psilocybin in. But can you explain a little bit more about those and how, you know, what the benefits of taking those are?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I developed some mushroom ritual blends, which really my intention was to, you know, teach people about how to create a ritual with mushrooms, whether or not they have the psilocybin, since it's not legal yet. It's kind of this in-between zone. But so I created 4 different blends that are kind of like they match, you know, there's a morning blend and like a midday blend and an evening blend, and they have different medicinal or culinary mushrooms. So for example, the sunshine blend has lion's mane and cordyceps. And so you can
what's the deal with lion's mane? Because I've read a lot recently about how lion's mane goes quite well with microdosing, and it kind of goes hand in hand. I've been reading a lot about it. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so lion's mane is a really cool one. There's a ton of research. It's really, it's been used for a long time in traditional Chinese medicine. A lot of culinary mushrooms have. So there's a lot of research out there if people are interested. But lion's mane and psilocybin together, they support like building new neural connections. So lion's mane, even if you're not microdosing, it's so good for your cognition, for your memory, for your brain, for helping our brains stay like plastic. Like neuroplasticity. So like it's flexible basically, instead of rigid, which happens as we age. We get a little more rigid, our cells start to kind of degrade. So lion's mane is super good or even for people that have like brain injuries. Lion's mane is so good for the brain. It's like a brain superfood.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to be straight away after this buying some lion's mane.
Absolutely.
And in these blends, I mean, how do you take those? Are they kind of like in a drink or supplement?
Yeah, so they're powders. So my intention is for like a mushroom ritual beverage. So I like to add, like a hot milk, some sort of healthy fat like ghee or coconut oil, and then some of the mushroom ritual blend, so like the sunshine, and then blend it, and some sweetener. Definitely. Okay. Sweetener is helpful. And then blend it. And then, I'll set an intention. I might go outside and just have like 10 minutes and sit under a tree and just like check in with myself, and check in with how I want my day to flow, or what I'm needing support with, whatever it is. And then I can kind of just contemplate on that while I'm sipping my drink.
Nice. And do you kind of teach microdosing, or do you do kind of like classes or anything? I think I've seen something on Instagram where you can do some like coaching.
Yeah, I do offer one-on-one sessions, and I have been doing group programs. I don't have my schedule figured out for this year because I just launched this new business with the mushroom ritual blends. So I've been a little busy, but yeah, I do really like doing group programs. And then I have a free microdosing community, actually. We just had we're doing like monthly microdosing with the moon rituals and a monthly Q&A, and it's all free. So anyone that is brand new to microdosing, you can just come in and ask questions and learn from each other, because it's such a new thing. There's research coming out like every week, every month, but there's a lot that we don't know. And so I find that for people that are just starting, it's like so helpful to have a community to talk to.
And when you say you do kind of microdosing with the moon, like how do you think that works hand in hand? Because I mean, I'm always quite fascinated about, moon cycles, but personally, I don't know too much about it. So I mean, yeah, how does that work in your workshops?
Yeah, so really, I feel like the moon is something that it's a cycle that every single person on earth has in common. Like we're all sharing this. We can all connect to this if we want to, however we want to. I mean, back in ancient times, they would plant on the full moons because you could see. I mean, there's a lot of different examples of how we've worked with the moon over time. And so I like to incorporate microdosing with the moon because it also helps me. Like today that we're recording is a Libra full moon, and so it helps me kind of, it's like a check-in point where I'm like, okay, let's just like pause. How am I doing? How are these last couple of weeks? Do I need to reorient for the next weeks ahead? And then you can work with the archetypes of the astrology if you're into that. You don't have to though, right? It can just be like, oh, it's a full moon today. I'm going to journal a little bit. And microdosing can support us to just kind of like connect in a little more and drop in a little more, and maybe glean a little more wisdom from anything that we do in a ritual practice.
Cool. And I mean, your friends, well, I mean, all your colleagues that used to be at Google, do you ever see them now? And are you ever like, my life's changed completely?
Yeah, life has changed a lot. I've moved, I don't live in the same place. I'm connected definitely to some on social media, but yeah, I'm on a pretty different life path, I think.
And I mean, to kind of round up, is there anything that you want to kind of, as a last point, just say about microdosing, and any information you can give about your kind of handles on Instagram, and then everyone can follow you and find out a little bit more, and maybe join in for some of your coaching sessions as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I created something. I basically just synthesized it. It's a great resource. I'll say it's a great resource. Sorry, I was getting down on myself. I put together the 7 pillars of an effective microdosing practice, and that's a blog post on my website, which is micro-glow.com. And so for anyone that's starting out, I send them that blog post because it just goes over like ingredients, sourcing, sweet spot, like schedules and protocols, the importance of taking breaks, setting intentions. And so that's a resource. I've got stuff on my blog. I'm on Instagram at micro2_glow. And also my personal is Sena 2_Maria. And yeah, I love connecting with people in this free community. That's kind of where I want people to hang out, and like I'm spending a lot of time in that community. So if people have questions, I highly recommend checking that out.
Brilliant. Well, honestly, it's been so enlightening finding out, more about microdosing. It's been something that I've kind of researched online, but I mean, a lot of the articles are kind of a little bit too mumbo jumbo for my brain. So you've just kind of explained it so cohesively. And I feel like I've kind of went on that journey with you. And I mean, the kind of transition from where you were to where you are now, it's like so incredible to hear. So thank you so much for chatting with me today. And yeah, I look forward to kind of keeping up with what you do next.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a great combo.
Thanks so much, Sena. Bye.
Bye.